So, you were involved through the 56 war, the 73 war. You saw the conflict mushroom as you had predicted it would. There's so much to talk about historically, but I think we've established your credentials and your involvement. So now, if we may, can we talk about what's happening
today, the sad
as we
days.
speak? I've already sort of let out a few of my views and terms for the situation, but I don't want to bias you. You tell us, what do you think about the peace process?
What?
And please, no holds barred. This is Mideast Realities. There's going to be no censorship. You can say whatever you want. You can use whatever language you want. Just tell the viewers the truth as candidly as you understand it.
You said peace process. I said, what peace process? There is no peace. Peace is nowhere in sight. I think Arafat was misled, allowed himself to be misled. But I want to say one thing. I think Palestinians and their supporters owe a lot to Yasser Arafat, so that I will not publicly criticize him. Except,
no, come on, tell the viewers the truth here. This is not diplomacy. We're wearing coats and ties, but this is an opportunity to help people who haven't made 27 or 150 trips to the Middle East, who don't know these people personally, who don't understand the intricacies of the situation. If you talk as if we're speaking privately. This is not for publication in the New York Times or for publication in a book.
They wouldn't publish it.
I mean, Edward Said has called his old friend Yasser Arafat a collaborator, and he's a Palestinian.
I don't think he's a collaborator. I think he's badly judged as what is his only way out when money was withdrawn by the Arab countries, and he's led himself into a cul-de-sac from which it's very difficult to. When the American media demands fair play for Arafat, you know that something stinks to the high heavens. The New York Times, and you know that something is wrong.
Come on, you haven't phrased it. I was in the Middle East last in May, and while I was there, we heard that the president of the President's Conference of American Jewish Organizations had written articles asking American Jews to contribute to the PLO.
Because the money that they were supposed to be getting from the United States and the other brave countries supporting the peace in the Middle East have not come forward with the money they were supposed to come forward.
Well, give me just a second. We're going to come back to this subject.
Yeah.
I'm Mark Brzezinski. You're watching Mideast Realities. And now we're going to take a short break, and we're going to give you this week's quote of the week. And now our quote of the week. This week, a spokesman of Yasser Arafat speaking about Musa Mohammed Abu Marzouk, who was arrested at Kennedy Airport for being a leader, political leader of Hamas. Quote, "We naturally offer to accept Brother Abu Marzouk, who is of Palestinian origin, in Gaza if no place of residence is found for him." Unquote. What a disingenuous comment from people who have essentially become Gaza jailkeepers and whom Edward Said rightly compares to the collaborationist German-installed French Vichy government during World War II. The Israeli-American plan to further divide the Palestinians from themselves continues with this latest step. The arrested Hamas leader's brother is Brigadier General Mahmoud Abu Marzouk, none other than the head of the Palestinian Authority's Civil Defense Department. We're with Dr. Alfred Lilienthal, and we're in the midst of having moved on from history, having moved on from all these books, having moved on from your involvement with the kings and the prime ministers and the UN negotiators of a time shortly before I was born. And now we're talking about the peace process. Let's leave Yasser Arafat alone for a moment, where we have a little disagreement as to the nature of today's PLO. Let's talk about the process itself. American policy, European policy, Middle East policy, the policy of the Arab states. What, in your view, is the peace process if it's not a peace process?
It's a sham. To titulate is always a nice word, the wishes of many Americans that there should be peace, because you've said there is peace in the Oslo Agreement and in the White House handshake. I was on the lawn of the White House, and even then I was skeptical that we were giving away.
I didn't know you were on the lawn of the White House.
But
we might have had some extra conversation about this.
yes, I was sitting. The strangest thing, I almost didn't get in. I was told to be there at
Lucky
8:15,
you.
and I was there. And who do you think also almost didn't get in? And I was with them, the brother-in-law and sister-in-law of Yasser Arafat.
Well, that's all right. I heard that there was tremendous confusion among the Palestinians. They didn't even know how to make phone calls and issue invitations. But as you also know, the head of the Palestinian delegation, Dr. Abdul Shafi, refused to come to the ceremony. Many other major Palestinian personalities were not there. Okay, you were there.
It was history. I had to be there because I'd been in '88 at the recognition of PLO by the United States, so-called in Geneva. I was been at every highlight, the 4 or 5, when Arafat addressed the General Assembly. I was there, so I had to be there.
All right, but let's go to the heart of this. The peace process, that's what it's called, that's what everybody knows it as. If it's a sham, what's the purpose of the sham, and why are so many of the Arab parties cooperating with it?
Well, the Arab parties have just given up the struggle against Zionism. The United States, without the Soviet Union, is too powerful, and the United States and a PLO lineup is even more, and people are deluding themselves that this series of agreements, the Cairo, Oslo, Washington agreements, could lead to peace. They can't lead to peace because the United States policy is fixedly along with Israel against a Palestinian state, and the only way for peace is for two states. It's too late to go back to a binational state, which Martin Buber, Albert Einstein, and myself as a young man wanted. Only two states living side by side, coexisting equally, can bring peace, and this is barred by the Oslo Agreement.
That's the purpose of the Oslo Agreement, isn't
To
it?
give you the hocus pocus,
Right.
and think that Jericho, Gaza will never grow into what is needed.
I've seen quotes from Peres when he's not speaking to American audiences but speaking to Israelis. I've seen quotes from the foreign minister of Israel, Shimon Peres, the architect of this agreement, even more than Rabin, who I think has come along with it with some
Reluctantly,
hesitation.
right.
Not because he's against it, just because he has a hard time even uttering the term Palestinian.
Just because I see he couldn't shake Arafat's head. Clinton pushed Arafat to shake his hands that day.
But Peres has said in private meetings with Israelis, we haven't given up anything. Gaza wasn't ours. We're glad to be rid of it.
That's the important thing. Glad to get rid of it.
We haven't changed. We haven't given up anything. They have changed. The implication being very clearly that the Zionist policy is very consistent, which I think it is actually, whereas the PLO of Yasser Arafat decided to acquiesce for whatever reasons. You have a higher opinion of Mr. Arafat than myself. I happen to, might as well say it since you're being very diplomatic. I believe Edward Said was not only very courageous but extremely thoughtful in being willing to say two things clearly, and he did this earlier this year. Number one, that what Arafat has allowed himself to be, that's more important than what he is. What he is a judgment. What he's allowed himself to be, I guess this is a judgment too, is a collaborator, a collaborationist regime. And then Said went on to compare it to Vichy France. When the Nazis occupied France, Marshal Pétain from the French army all of a sudden became, what did he become? President of France, with de Gaulle in opposition. All analogies break down, just like calling it apartheid or Bantustans. They're imprecise, there are differences. But to me, that's probably the best analogy there is. Now, where's this peace process, since we have to use these terms to summarize what's going on, where is this going to lead?
Nowhere. Nowhere. I can't look down the road, but it's not going to lead to peace.
Oh, but we need you to look down the road. You're 80-some years old. You've been living this for 40 or 50 years, and we need some help. Where is this going?
Nowhere. Nowhere. It'll break down, and eventually, perhaps, there may be an uprising on the West Bank. I don't see that coming because this is not in the style of the Palestinians to have internal revolts like that. You have little movements, but never catastrophic movements overthrowing their leadership.
Realities. We'll be right back with Dr. Alfred Lilienthal, but now our lie of the week. Headline for this week's lie: Saudi propaganda in America. This week's lie of the week is actually an entire feature section in the publication Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. Published with considerable encouragement and support from the Arab establishment, especially the Saudis, this publication is in actuality a propaganda vehicle with the purpose of distorting coverage of Middle East affairs in ways to the benefit and liking of the kings and royal families who rule, oppress, and squander the resources of the region. Now, from the September 1995 issue of the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs, with pictures of past and present Saudi kings adorning the top page of the extensive cover feature about Saudi Arabia, a few quotes. Quote, "The year 1995 will go down in the Middle East history as the year that Saudi Arabia got its second wind," unquote. Quote, "Saudi Arabia's remarkable new cabinet," unquote. And quote, "The Saudi economic recovery is very good news for the United States," unquote. Plus, there's a gushing book review by former government official and Washington Post editor Richard Curtis of the book Desert Warrior by HRH, that's His Royal Highness, for those of you who are wondering, General Khalid bin Sultan. Now, in the old colonial bastion of England, the wealthy establishment, the wealthy Arab establishment, has its exclusive lavish dining clubs, its extensive list of available women, a variety of political and journalistic hacks to do its bidding, and the publication Middle East International to twist things their way among academics and intellectuals. In the new superpower, America, the same fat cat Arab establishment, increasingly self-centered, increasingly parasitic, and increasingly despicable, led by a group of Saudi businessmen, along with members of the royal family, and working in tandem with old-line State Department Arabists and closet anti-Semites at the American Enterprise Trust, AET. They also have their publication, this one seductively known as the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs. Now, many publications accept features of paid advertising from governments and sometimes corporations, identifying them as such. But there's no need for the Saudis to purchase a paid advertising section and to so label it when it comes to the Washington Report. For what appears in its pages is practically the very same thing, though masquerading as journalism and information. If we had a lie of the year, for the current cover feature, Washington Report would definitely be nominated and would be likely to win. No doubt, former Ambassador Andy Kilgore, now publisher of Washington Report, and Dick Curtis, executive editor, have rushed copies to the Gulf to show off to their patrons and benefactors. The police state that Yasser Arafat has established, for good or for bad, whatever reasons he has for doing it, is repressing the Palestinians with the same torture tactics, many of the same prisons, many of the same things that the Shin Bet used to do to the Palestinians, but now it's being done by Yasser Arafat's secret police. And in fact, in Gaza, there is today one secret policeman for every 50 Gazan citizens.
Yep.
Paid for and armed by the Israelis, with torture techniques taught by the Shin Bet. My God, it's been on the front page of the Washington Post. You don't have to be an expert about the subject. So it's not, in my experience, there is a lot of opposition among Palestinians, but if the price you're going to pay is that you're going to have the Israelis and or the Palestinian Authority torturing you, threatening you, beating you, it's a little difficult to rise up in rebellion.
It is. It is terribly.
The same thing is true in Egypt. We tremendous repression in Egypt. Saudi Arabia is a police state.
And we just heard about the crimes against the killing of Israelis, Palestinian soldiers by, get me straight on that, the recent disclosure of...
Oh, you mean Israeli killing of Egyptian soldiers
after the 67,
56 and 67 war. It's been a major controversy in Israel. Apparently, the Israelis have done in history exactly what they've always screamed and hollered was done to them. They've killed captured Egyptian army people who were tied up and defenseless.
And so they couldn't take them along with them, and they just shot them in the desert, right?
But as I said, we're going to move on from the history because you and I could probably do a show every week
on the history
if there were people who every week wanted to revisit the history. Now, I frankly think these books are fantastic, that you've made with these 5 books a contribution to the historical record as few people have. There's only a handful of people, really, that have done this kind of writing in English. When it comes to Arabic and Hebrew, someone else is going to have to speak. But
what are we going to? You wanted me to? I can't forecast down the road. I mean, I know that
you forecasted very well in the 40s and 50s. Now I want you to forecast now.
Can I say, here comes the Middle East? I wrote, there goes the Middle. Here comes the Middle East. I think the people who are opposed to Arafat, and you mentioned one, I think he's a wonderful man, but they lack the spark, and something is wrong. Dr. O'Shafi, I heard him speak in Washington about there was no constructive program. He was saddened to criticize Arafat the same way I'm sad, knowing that the whole thing is wrong and that there's certain flaws in Arafat's character that have come to this. I say that because I have respect for the man who did so much.
You continue to be very generous.
I mean, and never...
For the man who squandered the resources and wealth of the Palestinians.
Such as they are.
What do you mean, such as what they are? Yasser Arafat squandered huge amounts of money in the billions of dollars, has around him family members that have bought homes in the exclusive suburbs of Paris and Washington. His mother-in-law has been given millions of dollars over the years to do little things like publish.
No, there I'll stop. She's a great lady, and she's a great journalist too. And her
oh boy, at least we have some things to fight about. Raimonda didn't even write the book. The book was ghostwritten by an Israeli journalist.
What, the book?
My Home, My Prison.
My Home. I've been captivated by Raimonda.
Well, that's possible. I know you have a weakness when it comes to attractive women.
She is,
and Raimonda.
And she was, when she had her news agency in Jerusalem, she was very kind to many people, and she was very fervent in her.
Okay, you want?
Let's not get into
no, just the opposite. This is Mideast realities. It's come up. Let's get into it, because here's actually a distinction between ourselves, not just generational. While opposing Israeli policies, and while opposing American policies in the Middle East, and I think it's understandable how this happened. But nevertheless, I've always had the impression over the years, you got drawn in, maybe reluctantly, maybe without thinking about it, maybe you were just too busy with focusing on these issues. But you ended up being supportive of regimes that are as repressive to their own people as the Israelis are to the Palestinians. I'm speaking of the Jordanian Hashemite
never
monarchy.
Supportive of
I'm speaking of the
luckiest
monarchy.
Man in the world. Oh, I've got a watch. I should have my Mickey Saud that I wear and kid about.
I'm speaking of your occasional publications in what I jokingly call the Saudi Report on Middle East Affairs, the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs.
Oh, no.
And, I mean, for me, for instance, the peace process is more than Palestine. The peace process is really about the structure of the Middle East. And for me, the monarchs and dictators and royal families of the region have decided that it's better for them to go into alliance with the Israelis and the Americans.
Right.
Screw the Palestinians, some fig leaf to cover it up. We lost it, and now we need the power of both the United States and Israel and the Jewish lobby. The interesting thing about Washington in the years, you've been here about 10 years now, and I've been here longer. The alliance in the city now is between the Arab establishment lobby working with the Israeli Jewish lobby, working with the American government, and all their secret services working with each other to keep down popular movements, branded fundamentalist in many cases, in the region. So it's no longer the central focus on Palestine. Now it's a focus on, can these regimes retain power? And at what price can they retain power? We should be writing, what price Saudi Arabia? What price Egypt, where they dress up former generals in nice Savile Row suits and pretend that they have a democratic government, which of course is a total joke. It's just a police state, a military state with the old generals dressed up in nice clothes. And my God, the repression in Saudi Arabia is fantastic.
I know that. I know
so,
that.
Over the years, I think, while you were so busy focusing on the Israeli, American, Palestinian context, what has happened is these regimes have consolidated themselves in power through money and repression. But
and the help
I've
of
said
the U.S.
enough.
government, right?
You tell me now
I
how you view this.
I think a large amount of what you've said is true. And I think in the long run, both their own people and certainly the Palestinian people have suffered as a result. I have gone back and I've been horrified at the close alliance, and I was telling an ambassador not too long ago, when are you going to hoist up the American flag next to your Arab flag?
And what did he say?
This is a rather harsh judgment, isn't it? And I'll go to his embassy party a week from now and we'll shake hands, but they don't want to fight Zionism. They don't want to, they've given up. And in an article as yet to be published, I've come out and said it.
Their major fight is not against Israel. Their major fight is against their own people, isn't it?
Against each other.
And each other.
Who's going to come out on top? Who's going to be top dog? Jordan, Tunisia. When the general was here on his first visit, about 6 years ago, the one who succeeded General Bourguiba, President Bourguiba, General, you come up with the name. I have everything, but I have Namesheimer. Would anybody in the audience please say?
Only once, not among my specialties, but so I don't know his name.
Anyway, I've visited Tunisia a number of times, and I knew Bourguiba. And when this general was here on his first visit, having thrown Mr. Bourguiba out, which was a good idea, he had reached his peak of power and everything
Now
else.
watch it. You're getting up there yourself.
Yeah. When you reach, he's about the same age as I am. I went to his 75th birthday party a couple of years back. Anyway, the general went to a dinner, and at this dinner, he volunteered, according to insiders, and got into only 1-2 paper, that we should do more, the Western world, of which he said he was now allying himself, should do more for the Palestinians.
This Middle East. Let's talk more about these regimes. We haven't even mentioned the Gulf War, the '91 Gulf War. You and I have not talked about this privately, so I'm not sure what your views are. What happened in 1991? Was this a setup that Saddam Hussein fell into?
Yep, I'm sure of that. I'm no lover of Saddam. I saw him last on the, and I have a briefcase, I haven't got it here today, marked in memory, in commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the glorious revolution. That's the Ba'ath Revolution. So I was
the one where they killed the Hashemite family and cut off their heads and arms and dragged them through the streets of Baghdad?
Well, the revolution took place, he was talking about 10 years before they did this, right?
Okay.
Well,
that glorious revolution.
That was 58.
Right.
That was the 58. No, this was the revolution when Saddam and his party, the Ba'ath Party, came in control in 1978.
Fair enough. Okay.
Talking about that, I was in Baghdad 3 days before Nuri, Said, and King Faisal II went to their doom.
Re